Hello everyone and welcome to the Activist Lawyer Podcast. My name is Sarah Henry and I'm your host to this podcast, which offers a platform for lawyers to share their story and their journey into law and activism. Our guests will discuss the challenges and highlights of their work, as well as important cases, opinions on legal and political matters, and will offer up advice and tips for anyone interested in pursuing a career in human rights law, public interest law, or criminal justice. The Activist Lawyer Podcast is brought to you by the Granite Podcast Studio. Thank you so much for listening. Hello everybody and a happy new year. This is our first episode of 2026. We recorded it just before Christmas and delighted to release this episode as the first of our New Year Activist Lawyer podcast episodes. And I was joined in the studio by solicitor Diarmuid Brecknell from Phoenix Law. Now, Diarmuid has qualified as a solicitor only fairly recently, but has worked with the legal profession for several years. And it's really astonishing just to listen to him and realise how much important and high profile work he's been involved in such an early stage of his career. He works in the public law, inquests and inquiries department at Phoenix Law, working on cases such as the Hooded Men, the landmark Supreme Court case, McGuigan and McKenna, as well as Barnard, the Glenanne cases. Some of you will be familiar with that, and we've spoken about some of those cases on previous episodes. The Ballymurphy inquest, of course, where he assisted in this examination of the deaths of 10 civilians killed in Belfast during the introduction of internment in 1971, and indeed other legacy cases and matters relating to the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Diarmuid shares his experience of working on the Stardust Fire Inquest in Dublin, one of the most complex inquests ever held in Ireland, which ultimately secured the verdict of unlawful killing for 48 victims, a landmark judgment following 40 years of injustice. He also talks about the challenges working on historical sexual abuse cases in Ireland and really sheds a light on the detail of the work of a solicitor in these extremely challenging and very sensitive cases. Diarmuid also shares his journey into law, shaped by his own family circumstances and indeed very much by his father, who is a well-known figure campaigning and fighting for justice for victims, survivors and families harmed by the Troubles in the North. So this is just a really fascinating conversation with someone who is so deeply passionate about his work. Hopefully you enjoy today's episode, and as always, please remember to review and share the episode with your colleagues and with your friends. And thank you again for listening, and we look forward to the new year ahead. So Diarmuid, welcome to the studio. I'm glad you could join me in our studio today.
Thanks very much, thank you.
Well, we've had a wee chat beforehand and I suppose we better start recording what we were going to say. It's great to have another Phoenix Law member on the podcast.
Yeah, for your sins.
For my sins. I think we've had 5 or 6 maybe, which is fantastic.
Awful soon.
Yeah, that'll be great. But we'll get into your work in a little bit and what you're doing in particular and in general, I suppose. But I wonder, could you take us back in time, and it's not that long ago, I don't think, and tell us how you got into law and what maybe inspired you to get into this type of work?
Yeah, so I probably go quite a while back. I started in law. I'm only qualified, but I did my journey, as I said, but whenever we were speaking that we could probably do a full podcast on my journey. It took me quite a while to get into law. So I was in school in the Abbey in Uri, and sort of got found out at A-levels and failed nearly all my A-levels.
You got found out?
Got found out that I wasn't studying. I
see.
Failed all my A-levels basically, and I'll never forget it. My results in the back of the car, my mum going, "How do you get on?" Dreading it. And then went up to the Abbey and they said basically, "No, there's not a place for you to come back due to your results." So went down to Newry Tech that day and there was sports science available and I played sport, so I thought that'd be for me.
Yeah.
Had 2 great years in the Tech and really enjoyed it. It was handy enough, to be honest, and that probably suited me. And then went and trying to get into law. Took a notion that I wanted to do law. Probably come on to that and where that came from, but didn't get into law. Ulster University told me they don't accept BTECs, and then so as a result I ended up doing sports science at Belfast Met. I just wanted to get to the Holy Lands really. So I ended up just going to Belfast Tech basically, and a couple of months in was like, this is just not for me.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff as we did in Newry Tech, and not for me at all. So dropped out. Didn't have my parents for about 2 weeks and was still going up to the Holy Lands on a Sunday night and enjoying myself. Then sort of told mum and dad. Dad works in the Papua New Guinea Centre. He works on behalf of victims of the Troubles.
Alan's your dad,
Alan,
yes.
Yeah, in the Papua New Guinea Centre. And Mum pressured him into trying to get me a job in law. And I remember Dad going, "Do you actually want a job in law?" Mm-hmm. And I says, yeah. So I managed to get a job in Phoenix Law. And it was photocopying, running the court, doing anything outside of law that needed done really. And that's Phoenix had only opened, so it's about 6 or 7 years ago, and did about 12 months then, and that got me a small bit of extra UCAS points and managed to get into McGee.
Oh wow! Oh great!
Managed to get into McGee in Derry, and so then ended up doing my law degree in McGee. Second year was COVID, and then final year I got transferred down to Jordanstown.
Right, and then you stayed with Phoenix that whole time pretty much.
Yeah, so I worked throughout my degree. So my degree I think was 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and then the other 2 I would go into the office, and it was, I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's a slog, and you're probably just, but have a watch case. I was on the Ballymurphy case then, and the Ballymurphy inquest, and that was invaluable experience to be getting in court. I regularly say you need to go to court every now and again to remember what the job's about and enjoy the job, and court is it's very unenjoyable sometimes. Took 1 year out and then came back, and as I said, invaluable experience to work throughout that. And I've been with Phoenix after the 1 year out. I've been with Phoenix ever since. So that's where I am now today.
Good on your mum and dad.
Good on my mum and dad, yeah. And, well, look, at the reason I get into law, obviously, as well, comes back from dad. Having been, well, he's a victim himself. My grandfather was killed in the Troubles, and that's where dad he went from being a quantity surveyor to a victim support worker now. So I also took a case at the European Court of Human Rights, and all of that sort of stemmed and sort of interested me for a long time. And dad, I still regularly go to dad for legal advice because he's so good on the law.
He knows his stuff.
So it's that's basically where all my interest sort of stemmed from, and that's where I am today now.
Brilliant. So you're kind of immersed already without even knowing it. Law kind of became your destiny. Yeah. And what does it look like at the moment in terms of your type of work? And maybe for people who aren't familiar with the firm, share a little bit about Phoenix Law and the type of practice that you do.
I joined Phoenix, and I think it's 6 years ago, and there was 7 or 8 of us. It was the 4 partners, 2 solicitors, one trainee, 1 solicitor, and 2 administrative staff, and probably the 2 most important there, to be fair. But now there's about 35, I think. It's quite a big office now, and what we sort of do is a lot of human rights, but we do everything alongside human rights. You constantly see the big challenges in the news, but the equally important stuff is the helping people who's struggling in terms of I do quite a bit of housing issues. I do quite a lot of civil issues. A lot of abuse and historical institutional abuse is a large part of Phoenix's practice. Everyone has their speciality, but you all dip into different things. And I think whenever Phoenix was set up, they said it's not going to be like a normal firm. Well, number one is it's not going to be named after the partners. Phoenix is going to carry on long after they go. And I think it does work like that. It works like a big team. And as I said, the administrative staff are equally as important as the solicitors. Everyone has quite a very high work rate. Everyone sort of mucks in, helps each other out. And as I said, I couldn't ask for a better place to sort of learn my trade, because you get little bits of everything throughout,
Yeah, it's really hands-on experience. So maybe looking at your work a little bit in particular, I'm interested in the legacy issues that you've been working on, and it's a very tough but a vital area that we still need to focus on decades later in terms of access and justice and redress as well, and compensation and all of those things. So can you tell us a little bit about your work on behalf of the victims and survivors of Troubles in Northern Ireland, which of course is close to you and your family?
Yeah, it all stems from, really, for me, it all stems from my granda being killed in 1974, and Dad's work throughout that as a victims campaigner and works so closely with victims. And I think it gives me a sort of unique insight to work with victims, is that I sort of understand it that wee bit more. I'll never say that I understand their grief, because I don't. But there's several different, like as I said, I learned my trade sort of in the Ballymurphy inquest, which was a milestone in Northern Ireland, and I understood then what it's like to sort of balance, 1, the law, and 2, the victims, and how to also explain to victims what's happening, explain why you're doing things, which is as equally important as why you're doing things or how you're doing things. And at the minute, there's a wasted cost order for the Eugene Reevy and the Brennan farmers civil action against the state, and that's for consistent delays and consistent breaches of court orders in terms of discovery. And working victims through all of those sort of civil actions is so important to work with them as people more than anything, and explain what's actually happening. Sometimes you can get lost in the law, but it's so important also to call them and say, I'm doing this and this is why I'm doing this, and sort of talk them through those different things. So the legacy stuff is really close to my heart. It's probably why I do what I do. I probably do a lot of other things to allow myself to do legacy. And Gavin Booth and Diarmuid is both the same. It's probably something I learned, that you can do the good stuff, but you also need to be able to keep the lights on.
Exactly.
It's something I really enjoy. And something, as I said, is really close to my heart, and I'm in court regularly, and Dad's there supporting the victims, and we're probably arguing most of the time, but it's a good relationship to have too, you know.
Excellent. And I know that's incredibly challenging work, and there's another area that's probably equally as challenging and related in the sense that it's historical, and that's also looking at institutional abuse. Victims and survivors of that. And we've had so many of our Irish lawyers who've been on the podcast to speak about that. And it's something that we're still dealing with, again, years later, and some in the not so distant past as well. Can you shed some light on maybe the progress around your work in that and how you've maybe helped families through that?
Yeah, so I started work, whenever I first started work, I was, myself and Dara were working on the Hickson Commission, which is into the actions of Bill Keneally. Bill Keneally was a paedophile who acted in the Waterford between 1980s right up to sort of late 90s, and there was questions at all times about Garda Síochána, how much they knew, did they know, and political influence, as he was related. His uncle was a TD and a minister at the time, and through that work so that's sort of working with victims, explaining things. There's hearings, you're sort of talking victims through what's actually happening, and at the same time also trying to find out what's happening. So throughout hearings, it came out that he was interviewed in 1987 at the height of his abuse, and was basically told, go see a psychiatrist, and wasn't properly arrested. Nothing happened. His abuse continued thereafter, and I said tens of boys were then abused after 1987. So it's about those feelings and working all of that back, and it's really difficult as well. Like you say to victims, and like, again, I have a case of Michael Shine at the minute, and I'm trying to say this is a good thing to try and get a commission investigation, which is basically an inquiry, and say this is good. They're saying, oh, we need the truth, and the other side of it is I've seen the victims who I'm really, really close with in Brecknell, and it's a really difficult experience for them. It's like doing open surgery, stitching it up, and then opening it up again and looking through what's actually happened. And the truth can be very painful. It can be, I will say, it's a societal issue that you need the truth to learn, but learning can be difficult at times. And I've seen victims in the Keneally case really struggle with the hearings and really struggle, and it's about trying to bring them along and say, you need a lot of trust to say this is actually going to be good. And then through the Keneally, then it led to me being instructed in the Michael Shine.
Right.
Who in the Michael Shine sort of application at the time for an inquiry. Michael Shine was a surgeon who worked in Our Ladies of Lourdes Hospital in Drogheda. He worked there from the 60s right up to the 90s. He was lauded as the greatest surgeon in the island of Ireland. Anytime someone says, oh, I have Michael Shine for this operation, everyone says, oh, you're going to be well looked after. He was sort of genuinely like a godlike figure in Drogheda, but there was constant allegations about sexual abuse of young boys. It was never investigated to the stage where I have a client who was actually, whenever he went to report it to Garda Síochána, was told to write a written apology to Michael Shine. Michael Shine has since been convicted of being a paedophile. He's been convicted of lesser charges, but I started working with Dignity for Patients, a charity who deal with all these people, and there's upwards of 380 victims.
380?
Upwards. They also say in sexual abuse that there's, for every one comes forward, there's 5 that doesn't. So he operated with impunity for 30 years in the hospital, abusing young boys, in his own house abusing young boys, sometimes sedated, sometimes under general anaesthetic, and could never be questioned. We then started working with them and started trying to get an inquiry opened. I met with Taoiseach, I met with the Minister for Health, and had quite a constructive meeting two weeks ago. And it looks like we're heading towards a public inquiry. So
that's huge.
But it's very difficult to get there.
Yeah.
It's you have to, and the problem is that the victims have to waive their anonymity. 1, you need a concerted media campaign. 2, and you need political support to just get the government to react.
It's ironic, given that a lot of these issues, we are where we are because it was politically driven, or there was so much in terms of cover-ups and politicians, etc., not doing their jobs, and that applies to both legacy cases where the Troubles are concerned as well. So gosh, that's a huge step forward,
a massive step forward. And we had the meeting with, and it talked about sort of working with victims, and I had several meetings that went to 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night in hotels in Drogheda with a group of who are now older men trying to say, please trust me, and in my own head saying, do I trust myself in this? And that the evening after the meeting with the government, I had to go to Drogheda and say, trust me, this is going the right direction. And it's a lot of pressure at times to say, trust me, I'm doing the right thing, when at times you don't actually know if you are doing the right thing. And you talk about the political influence. It's a massive problem, especially in the south. where you need political influence to get anything done.
Yeah.
I always say government should be proactive, not reactive. Outrageously reactive in the south, and they will only ever do anything, and the north, but they will only ever do anything whenever you actually put enough pressure on them and hit them where it hurts, and that's the media. Victims should not have to bear all in a public forum.
And they do in Ireland, and they've done it for decades.
And like we had a group managed to get 5 men who very bravely came forward and spoke about their abuse. See if they didn't come forward, see if they didn't put their name to it, we would be nowhere. So trying to approach someone to say we need you to put a face to this is incredibly difficult and a real flaw in the system.
My goodness, that really shows. I mean, people from the outside looking in, I guess, maybe want to work in this area of law, and obviously it has its rewards as well, and it's very satisfying once you get results, but that's so challenging even to speak to people and who've maybe told their story several times, and then you have to document that as well. It's really, the word you mentioned, their trust is huge, you know.
It's massive, and it's very hard earned. It's very hard earned. It's very easily given away. I think, especially in the Michael Shine stuff, and the Michael, they say stuff in terms of how it sort of progressed. There was it was called the Drogheda Review in 2009, where Justice Smith looked at all of this and took statements from over 100 men, and they thought they were getting somewhere, and the review ended in two findings. One, that there'd be no more investigation into this, and 2, that these files be locked forever, right? That then went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, the victims tried to get access to their own statement, that went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then deemed it as his own personal files, and that will then fall in his estate.
Right.
So the victims have said, we've been through this, and we didn't get what we wanted. Why is this different? I had to say at the time, because it's a brilliant question. Why is this different? And trying to get the trust over for people who's been burned so many times is so unbelievably difficult. But as I said, well, the thing is, I said to them, I was like, I know I need to get results, and results is progress. And if you consistently get progress, which is difficult at times, trust starts to grow. But I always find as well, whenever you're dealing with victims, that trust is hard earned, but whenever you have it, then they will stick by you till kingdom come. And that's just in the Stardust as well, the Stardust Inquest. Those families stood by us on every single decision. Just remind
us of the Stardust Inquest again, just people aren't familiar.
Sorry, I probably just moved on that very quickly.
But it's related, but it's huge.
So we acted in the Stardust Inquest. The Stardust was a nightclub in Artane in Dublin on Valentine's night 1981. A fire broke out and 48 people died. There was allegations at the time that the fire exits were chain locked. They were all refuted, and it's now, thankfully, after the inquest, it's common knowledge that a number of them were locked and people died as a result. The reasons they were chain locked was they were saying that the owner said obviously people are trying to sneak in, so he had them chained. There's harrowing stories of people running to doors, busting, trying to kick doors open, bust them open. Some people do bust chains open and manage to get out, but 48 young people died. And it's the largest loss of life ever in South of Ireland in one single incident. They were campaigning for years for an inquiry. There was a tribunal at the time called the Keane Tribunal. It was widely renowned as a whitewash. It didn't make any proper findings. Those families stuck together as a 48, and sometimes it's hard to grasp how big a number 48 is, but they stuck together throughout. Antoinette Keegan campaigned every single day of her life. They did sleep-ins outside the Dáil, they did sleep-ins in the Dáil, they did sleep-ins in the minister's offices to try and get an inquest opened. Then in 2018, I believe it was, there was an inquest granted, basically, and that inquest then started in 2023 and it ran for 18 months, and Phoenix all were instructed. It was ourselves and a team of 8 barristers. We moved down to Dublin. We did 18 months, Tuesday to Friday every week, living in Dublin, and acted in, by far and away, I don't think I'll ever top the experience that I got in Stardust. The intensity, but also how inspiring the families were at all times. And I talked about trust previously. No matter the decision that we made, the families always got behind you and said, whatever you say. And that comes from trust being built with victims. And once you have that trust, it's so valuable. And thankfully, I'll never forget the day that the jury came back after 2 weeks of deliberations and 2 weeks of pulling your hair out and not sleeping. We were in the pillar room, and it was chocker blocked. There was no seats, no one was sitting down, and chocker blocked, and the jury foreman read out unlawful killing, and it was probably the best day of my life so far. And it was absolutely incredible. And it's those moments, and I'm not going to pretend I'm going to get a moment like that ever again, but it's those moments that make it all worthwhile.
Brilliant. But isn't it just astounding that we have to, and it cannot be undermined, the efforts that families go through in this country for decades. Like that happened in the 80s.
81.
You know what I mean?
I was born in 99 and I acted in the inquest. Like that is a disgrace.
It is disgraceful. That institutional abuse, historic, the legacy cases, you know, it really shouldn't be undermined. The grassroots activism that families just take upon themselves for justice, and sometimes it's only breadcrumbs that they get at the end of it.
100%.
I mean, Stardust is obviously a massive success, and well done to you and the legal team, but that was no mean feat getting there. I mean, if the campaigners weren't as active as they were, I mean...
Well, it would not be investigated without, like, there's a core group of 4 or 5, but Anthony Keegan, and it would not have been reopened. Like, again, also, right, it's completely crazy. It was buried. It was completely buried. I didn't know what Stardust was whenever Dara first told me we were working on this. I didn't know what it was. That's a disgrace, right? Now it's being worked into the curriculum, and we're working on the Education Authority in the South for working it into the curriculum, but I had no idea what Stardust was. And then you start looking at it, it's like, how did I not know anything about this? And it's only for Antoinette Keegan and her mother, Eugene Kelly, Gertrude Barrett, and these people who just would not lay down. And it goes back to my sort of proactivity against reactivity. And what you have to do, unfortunately, is get politicians to be in such a bad position that they have to do something. That's not right. Fundamentally incorrect. And that's what they did. As I said, they camped outside the door. They did everything in their power. And thankfully we got the verdict that we wanted, you know. Fair
play to them and you and your team. Well, my next question, I don't know whether you've kind of answered it. Maybe it was about a standout moment for you. So early on in your career, you've got a massive wealth of cases behind you and experience. You've mentioned Stardust there. Is there anything else that really stands out for you, even if it's something success for clients or just from your own experience that you're happy to share?
At the moment after Stardust, I remember getting the verdict, and Des Fahy, senior counsel, turned around to me after we'd all calmed down. He goes, "By the way, it doesn't get any better than this." And I said, "I'm only starting here. That's a pretty depressing thing to think about." He was, I'll not say he's nearly finished, and he'll definitely not say that, but that is the standout moment, to be involved from the get-go, to see it all come about, to do the late nights, to be stressed beyond thinking, me and Harry in the office. I remember one time we were prepping and we were there at 2 a.m, then back in at 5 a.m, and to go through all of that and then for that to come as a result, and to see the families and them for some reason have a gratitude to you whenever you just feel a gratitude to them is incredible. I also remember very, very early on in my career, and it's something that's topical at the minute, is the Barnard judgment, and it's something that's close to my heart in terms of the PSNI not properly investigating the Glenanne gang and the legitimate expectation, the HET, going through all of that, and the Barnard judgment. Finally, Lord Justice Morgan said that this should be properly investigated and there should be a thematic review for that, because, well, 1, Dad was there, 2, it's about my grandfather. That was a massive part of my sort of beginning in law on a really big day, and it probably showed me this is how good it can be on the big days. It can be very bad sometimes, but that was a massive one, and just seeing Ballymurphy also finish was a massive win as well.
Huge wins and difficult circumstances to work in, challenging. You're obviously very personable, and I can see why clients would have that trust, but do you ever switch off, or how do you, this stupid question sometimes about work-life balance, you know, speaking to somebody like you and your colleagues, I mean, do you take time away, or how do you balance, because that's a lot to take on?
In complete honesty, I probably in the last not in the last month, it's probably been a wee bit better, but the month before, whenever you sort of first qualify and things, it's sort of like I say a midlife crisis, a bit of a crisis, or saying, well, is this what I want to do? Do I constantly want to be thinking about work? Do I constantly want to be just on the whole time? And it's something that I realised that you have to do it, not because it's a job, but because you want to do it and you want to succeed in this job. It's not, you're not doing it just to go pay the bills. You need to actually want to succeed, and that's where you actually become a lot better at your job. And that's something that I battle with, and I think coming out of the Institute as well, the Institute's fantastic, but seeing uni life again and then coming back to the real world is very difficult, and it takes you a while to get going again. But my work-life balance, I play both soccer and Gaelic football. Gaelic football is as everyone knows, is like a professional sport now, but it's difficult to manage, but it's brilliant also to have something outside of your work that you're also trying to be good at. It gives you, I don't know if you switch off, but it gives you time to sort of focus on something completely different. you don't switch off. Your emails are on your phone, clients ring you, and it is difficult at times, and sometimes you think it's the worst job in the world. But as I said, it's rewarding. I think at times, like even a couple of weeks ago, I had planned to go out for dinner with my girlfriend and was leaving the police station after an arrest. Got home, as my girlfriend answered the door, I got a phone call to go back to the police station for another arrest.
Yeah.
Had to ring the restaurant, managed to put it back in error. Thankfully, Ellen's very understanding of all of this, but it is difficult at times. But as I said, for me, I've noticed you need to do it not because it's a job, but because you want to do it and you want to succeed.
It's it isn't a job. I think it's very hard to define it as a job, and it requires a lot of patience as well, I guess. But I think it is important to have something outside of work as well. And sure, you're a Cullyhanna man. That's the
look at him, well used to hardship, you know.
And we've a Cullyhanna girl that helps us in with the podcast, Elaine. She'll be listening in.
Taking over.
She's big into her Gaelic as well. Yeah, so huge amount of work there, and it's challenging, as you said, but also very rewarding. And you've mentioned the standout moments there too. But I suppose our podcast activist lawyer, I'm interested in getting your thoughts on maybe what it's like to, I suppose, use the law as a tool to make change, but also alongside grassroots activists and campaigners. And there's no better person to speak to this than you and people who work alongside you, because your work is driven very often by campaigners. And how do the two work together to make that change needed?
I think I learned my trade from Diarmuid and Gavin Booth as well, and both of them are experts in it. And I think it's something that I sort of learned very early on. Dara described as using the ECHR as a weapon and a string to your bow, basically. And for a post-conflict society like Northern Ireland, where rights were denied for so long, it's so important then to, I'm not going to say balance the books, but then to use it whenever it wasn't used for so long. Hence why there's hundreds of cases and a backlog of cases. Then working in the community with different things. I remember my very, very first case was a housing issue, and I was able to use... I think the housing executive probably thought it was nuts, but I was trying to use her human rights and her rights to a private life, and I managed to basically get her, well, I don't know if I managed, but we managed to get her a house where she wasn't going to be getting one. And those sort of things really taught me early on that these things, and what Dara said is these things are a weapon to use. But what then working with NGOs, and I have the unique position that my dad works in an NGO. I came home a couple of weeks ago and Dad says it's good to see you in a personal capacity because we're working so closely at the minute, but they are far more inspiring than it's probably not a nice thing to say, than any lawyer I've seen. The people who are in it for the NGOs, they are only in it to do the right thing. They're only in it to act for the victims. They are only in it to try and make change in the world. Lawyers constantly are probably in it for some level, they probably not admit it, but there's an ego element to it. These people who work in the NGOs, who work in the community, are, to me, those impressive people, because they are, as I said, genuinely just feel like they want to do something right in the world, and bringing them along is very important. In the Michael Shine case, Adrian Riley is the CEO of Dignity for Patients, an absolute Trojan. Ring you 4 times back to back if you don't answer, but that's what she is. She's tenacious.
That's what you need.
She'll not take any offence to that because she does it and she laughs at herself. So, but she's tenacious. She acts on their behalf. For example, we had the meeting with the minister. Adrian sent me 4 press releases 2 days beforehand. Good result, bad result, not so good, not so bad. Right. And had all of this ready to sit and ready to go. And I said, this is just incredible to be working with someone like this. So I think the balance. And she says she supports the men, we represent the men, and Michael Shine. And I think the balance at times can become blurred, but it's very important. That blur can be a good thing. Yeah. That you're also supporting them as well as representing them, and bringing the NGOs and bringing the community along with you is just as important as getting the win on the law and reading the law.
Yeah, the real unsung heroes as well,
110%.
behind the scenes. And your work really demonstrates that. We were recently at an event that you and your colleagues hosted, the Know Your Rights workshop, which was fantastic. We held one here in Uri, and it was really beneficial to, I suppose, the local groups who are protesting. I think it's every Thursday they hold a protest here against the genocide in Israel. They're another tenacious bunch, fantastic, but had a bit of trouble here and there from PSNI and recording and all of this. So they wanted to know, what are our rights and what should we be aware of? How do you view that kind of community lawyering, I suppose? Because I feel like we're moving to that stage quite slowly here. I know in America they might be advanced in many respects with Black Lives Matter and kind of community groups and community lawyering there, but I find that very impressive to watch 4 lawyers explain people's rights to them very clearly, and then for a lot of them to use that.
Yeah.
And I've seen that going forward.
Mm-hmm. It's a scary place at the minute. I don't want to terrify anyone, but in terms of if you actually start drilling into it, the thought that the UK would even be considering leaving the ECHR is a terrifying place to be. The name of your podcast, Activist Lawyer, for people to be criticised for using your human rights, like just drill what that is. And also, Dara says, these are the most basic things. And they're saying, oh no, that's too much, lawyers are making too much out of this. So what we looked at and said was, well, what can we do to help here? And in my view, there's no point in having a right if you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And there's no point in having any rights if you don't know how to enforce them or try to use them. I'm not saying, by the way, that the PSNI is going to listen to you whenever you tell them that you're breaching their Article 4 right to protest. They're not going to listen to you, but it's important to know what you can and can't do. So we said that we can empower people by giving them the knowledge of what they can and can't do. So we decided to just do a night upstairs in the Sunflower and next to
the pub in Belfast.
The pub in Belfast, yeah, and a hub of that sort of real proper ideologies. And we said, look, we'll do a night, and just grew legs, and nearly for about 6 weeks there we had a different Wednesday. It was Wednesday night, and we did it in Finnegan's Sons. And I have to say that you can do the presentation till the kingdom come, but the Q&A afterwards is the most important part and really impressive part, where people say, well, some of these scenarios are hilarious. Like they're just saying, well, say person A was to wear Palestine action, but they and in the south, and then travel up in the north, and you're saying, are you person A? But but they were engaging and saying, right, okay, so what can we do? What can't we do? And it's sort of just empowering people, and that's why I think there's no point in having it if you don't know how to use it, and two, how to actually what you own. And part of I did the right to protest in the presentation, and one of the points I make is that protest isn't a privilege. Your right to protest isn't a privilege, it's a right, and it's a very difficult right to get around for the government. And you'll see that in the minister at the minute trying to basically alter the law to get around the right to protest, but it's very difficult. So they're talking about consistent protests being shut down, they're talking about consistent nuisance being shut down. To me, that's a breach, but because they know the right to protest is so difficult to get around, they're having to just make up things now to try and stop people. And there's no doubt why that is. There's no doubt that there's an uncomfortable...
They want it to stop, and this is their strategy to put people off coming out as well.
And it's an uncomfortable truth that they are, in my view, implicit in what's happening in Palestine. It's a really uncomfortable truth, and they want to shut it down. And people have protest time and time again. Extinction Rebellion went time and time again, and they went to the Supreme Court and won. Then they legislated thereafter, but there was never the same uproar about that. There's only the same uproar now because there is an uncomfortable truth about what is actually happening in Palestine.
Yeah, and I mean, it's gotten to the stage where we've people on hunger strike. In 2025, we've hunger strikers who are now at a situation that's absolutely deteriorating, and health-wise, there might be no way back for them. And you don't really hear very much about it. There's not much.
Very little about it. And it's, again, we did the kneecap case. There's no doubt that why he's being prosecuted. There's no doubt why all of these things are all happening. There's a common denominator, and what we said with the Know Your Rights is like, well, how can we help here? And what you can do is by empowering people, and hopefully people took away something after having to listen to us for a bit now.
Well, I know they did, and you weren't short for questions in the Newry session of Know Your Rights. It was quite entertaining at times, but a brilliant initiative, I think, for your firm to do. And it really kind of makes that connection between the lawyer and the community more real and tangible, whereby sometimes people might be afraid to even ask about their rights. So in these current times, I think you're right, it's really important that people are empowered and know what their rights are at a minimum, But I'm wondering what advice you might have, Diarmuid, for anybody who's listening, and I'm sure lots of people will be keen to follow you and your work and the work of Phoenix Law. But what would you say to someone who's interested in getting into your line of work?
Well, if you feel your ASs, don't fret, probably is my advice.
Good advice.
If you really want to do it and you have the self-drive to do it, your grades aren't going to hold you back, is what I would sort of say. I think it's a fantastic role to get into. It's something also, if you really want to do it, is you need working in it, because working in it is so important. The degree is, I can happily say I took nothing from my degree into real world, right? But I took the 2 days a week that I worked in Phoenix. I consistently use them every day, and I think if you can get in somewhere, and it's like the 2 weeks work experience can be good, but it's trying to get in somewhere consistently, and I know that's not easy, but that sort of experience is invaluable. I also know whenever I went to the institute, then I had 10 times experience than some other people. You're able to work through the industry, you're able to work cases and things, and it is a real bonus then whenever you qualify that you're actually 10 yards in front of everyone else, and that all comes from working throughout and working in the office. And it's probably not appealing, and I still enjoyed myself, but it's probably not appealing to work while you're in uni. But if I managed to still enjoy myself, I think and work, then anyone can do it.
That's a real balance.
Phoenix would say probably I didn't do much work, but it was really invaluable. And I think that office experience is invaluable. And as I say, don't worry about your grades. If you really want to do it, it'll work out, you know.
We had someone on recently who said, when we asked them this question, I thought it was really interesting. They said, remember that your peers and your colleagues at college are potentially people that you're going to be either on the opposition side or working with. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And especially here in Ireland, it's such a small kind of
and something I noticed whenever I started practicing, I did quite a bit in the south, is you don't know anybody in the south because it's such a massive jurisdiction, whereas in Belfast you know absolutely everyone. Exactly. Well, look, fantastic to have you here with us today. I really appreciate you sharing your work. There's loads there. We could probably talk for another hour. Diarmuid, thank you so much again for coming down and joining us in the studio. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining me today. If you like the show, please remember to share and leave a review if you have a moment. And you can also check out our website, www.activistlawyer.com, where you will see some blog articles written by our guests and contributors, as well as some fabulous Activist Lawyer merchandise.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.